Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard another edition of Sev Geff Live. Paul Severino and Glenn Geffner. Glenn, good to see you as always. A very special guest. Our last two shows have included Hall of Famers. This is fantastic. Dave Van Horn last time, and Jayson Stark coming up in just a couple of minutes.
This is going to be a lot of fun. When we go to Philadelphia 3 times a year, there are 3 things I look forward to. A couple of cheesesteaks, a couple of tasty cakes, and seeing Jayson Stark at the ballpark. Always one of the most enjoyable people to talk to on our travels. A guy who, for more than 4 decades, has covered this sport with a perspective, with a voice that's so uniquely his. So it's going to be fun to hear it here today.
Right. I like your numbers, and I'm sure he will too. I counted he's starting his 6th decade because he started in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and now we're in 2020. Wow. So it's not he's not doing 60 years of baseball. I'm sure he will, though, because his passion for the game is that has lasted forever. Exactly, which is fantastic. So we look forward to that. Again, a lot of different ways to check us out. If you're watching this, either it's on Periscope through our Twitter links or on our YouTube channel. We appreciate that. Glenn, you've been churning out a lot of great content to add to our library these last few days and weeks. So we all appreciate that. It's been great.
It's been a lot of fun. We've got a new SGL short up. Some fun from our recent conversation with JP Arancibia. We'll have another one coming up soon with Cliff Floyd, another with Dave Van Horn. We'll have some of the highlights from our conversations with them, some of our hit and run segments as well, which we debuted recently. So keep an eye on that YouTube page. A lot coming your way on a daily basis, even when we don't have a live show for you.
All right, awesome. Love it. Let's get to our guest right now. Always a pleasure to talk with Jayson Stark. Are you okay with us calling you a Hall of Famer? You like that? That's okay, right?
I'm supposed to fight people on that? It's a Hall of Fame honoree. You can call me whatever you want.
Stop with the honoree. Great. Hall of Famer rolls off the tongue more. We appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time. I think one thing that's on a lot of people's minds these days is, what's your take on the new Philly Fanatic?
That's where we start.
Yeah. He reminds me a lot of that former Philly Fanatic. I have to admit. Like at the very end in spring training, when we were all being placed inside a bubble so we could socially distance, it occurred to me that the Fanatic never got that memo. Rolling around doing his thing as America's most beloved biohazard.
Perfect, great. But no, in all seriousness, though, what are you up to these days? Are you staying busy even though there are no games?
I can't believe how busy I am. My wife really can't believe how busy I am. I work from home a lot anyway, so in some ways the mechanics of my job have not changed. There's just a slight little difference. There are no sports. And so we're doing, that thing that we sometimes have to do, where the stories that we tell are not the stories we'd like to be telling, but we still need to tell them. There's still a lot of people in the world like you guys who care about baseball, who care about sports, and we need to connect with those people, and they appreciate that we're connecting with them. So that's what we're doing. We're just trying to find new ways to connect with people who love baseball, and it's a strange time, but it's just part of the business, right? You do what you have to do.
We all need to work a little bit harder. We all need to get a little bit more creative. And Jayson, from my standpoint, your creativity is what sets you apart from so many others who do similar jobs. Will you take us back all the way to the beginning as a kid in Philadelphia? And I've never heard you talk about how you were indoctrinated in baseball, how you fell in love with baseball and began to develop this passion that really sets you apart.
I'm one of those lucky people in the world because I'm doing exactly what I always dreamed of doing from the time I was old enough to dream about doing anything. I told the story in my Hall of Fame speech, but there's a picture hanging on my wall, and it's me and my sister walking home from school. We figured out I was in 5th grade, she was in 4th grade. And underneath that is a little composition that she wrote for school about her crazy brother, the baseball nut. And it says, if you ever wanted to know anything about baseball, you should ask my brother. It's really surreal to look at that thing now and think, oh my God, this happened. Now,
I think he might have froze up for a split second there.
So we lost Jayson. He was on a roll also.
I know, he ran out of gas.
Very disappointing here. We know he was a baseball nut then. We know he still is a baseball nut to this day. And hopefully he's about to kick back in here. This is the first time we've had this happen.
Yeah. All right. Well,
let's talking about while you work on that. If you want me to talk for a second, if you want to try to get him back,
sure.
Jayson was talking about the need to get creative and look for different angles these days. He had a piece on The Athletic just this morning talking about the roar of the crowd and coming back post 9/11 and how much baseball meant to everybody after that horrific national tragedy, and the thought that in many people's minds, baseball can help with coming back from this pandemic at some point, hopefully before too long. But the thought of playing without crowds and taking away that roar of the crowd and that community feeling in the ballpark is what sets maybe this time around apart from what we saw back in 2001 after 9/11. It was a really interesting piece. Some of the quotes in there literally will give you chills when you read from some of the people who were involved in that first Mets game coming back and some of the early games at Yankee Stadium. Some amazing stuff from Jayson.
Yeah, there's no question about it. That's the thing about baseball. I'm working to get him back here on this side of things here. But so, yeah, I mean, that's the thing about baseball and about sports. So many times we might hear people say that it is a distraction from what's going on, but I think it's not even so much a distraction as much as it can be a rallying cry sometimes. And, we think of sometimes we think of the winter from those of us that know something about the Northeast and snow, that it's cold and you're cooped up in your house. And when spring begins, it's freshness, it's fresh air, it's outside, and all of our body clocks are now saying it's mid-April, it's going to be May pretty soon, and we're not seeing baseball just yet. But I think that's kind of one of the things that. We have him back. I believe we have him back. Let's check. But yeah, I mean that was just the thing, is that it's once we get baseball back, I think that in whatever form it does come back, hopefully we're
able to bring people together again.
Yeah.
I was talking when you were gone for a second about your piece this morning and the roar of the crowd, and how you'd like to think that at some point before too long we can get communities back together, rallying around the game. But more than that, if you're back, I want you to get back to the story you were telling. Growing up, your sister said, if you have a baseball question, Jayson's the guy.
Okay, just one last thing to wrap a bow around that is just my mom would make sure that if she read some great sports piece in the Philadelphia papers, she made sure that I read it. And she just infused in me that love of writing and reading, and I've just been on this journey ever since.
And she was a writer also, wasn't she?
Pardon me?
Was your mom a writer?
She was a great writer. Just loved to turn a phrase. And, my mom did all kinds of different writing, but, she got to meet a lot of famous people. She covered entertainment news. She did a little sports in her day before any of that was common for women. And so she was always talking about writing and pounding away on her keyboard. So that was just part of the soundtrack of my life.
The soundtrack of your life, maybe not today now, but now is going to the ballpark and kind of what Glenn was talking about in your most recent piece about that roar of the crowd. How do you think that's going to be? Do you think we'll get used to it in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, if we start baseball? And again, no one knows at the moment what the 2020 season is going to look like, but I think a lot of us probably think it will start, at least in some form or fashion, with nobody in the seats. Do you think it'll still feel a little bit like baseball, or how do you think that will feel without that added emotion from the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, it will not be the same experience, which is what I tried to write about in this piece, but somebody compared it to me to, now we're all trapped in our houses. So you see all the late night talk show hosts doing these shows from their houses, telling jokes with no audience. We see musicians doing shows from their house with no audience, and they finish their songs and there's silence. And I mean, we get used to that. So I imagine we would get used to baseball with no people. But the point I tried to make in this piece I wrote is that there's a power in the roar of the crowd that I think is unique to sports. It's a unique part of our life where there's really, to me, no other experience in our lives where 30, 40, 50, 100,000 people all assemble in one place and feel this same bonding emotion together as humans. It's just this unifying force in American life that to me would be missing. You think back on the great moments in baseball history, you don't just see them, you hear them. And so if those moments happen in silence, how different are they? How different do we think of them? What's the meaning of them? In this piece I wrote, I kind of compared to the age we're in now to 9/11. In baseball, first game back in New York, Mike Piazza hits one of the most momentous home runs of recent times. And John Schuerholz was the general manager of the Braves then, and told me it was the only time in his life that he ever cheered for a guy who hit a home run to beat his team. And here's a question. Does that happen if that game is played in a neutral site and there's nobody there? I mean, he had that emotion because it was in New York. He got caught up in the sound and the feeling and the emotion of everyone around him cheering for that moment. That's part of the context of that swing of the bat. That would be completely different now. So the box score would look the same, but would the meaning of these moments be the same? Just asking.
Yeah. So here's the question. I don't know if there's a right answer to this, but I've heard it thrown out there already. As someone who loves baseball, as the three of us all do, as anybody watching this show does, do we think we're better off having baseball without that, or just wiping the year 2020 off the history books altogether and not having baseball at all until we can all do it the way it ought to be done together?
Yeah, Glenn, I grappled with that very question in the piece I wrote, and I think people in baseball are all grappling with it now too. I think everybody's coming to the conclusion that if the season is going to start anytime in the near future, there's no scenario where it starts the way we remember it, where every team is playing games in its home city with packed houses. The only scenario to begin to play again is in empty ballparks, wherever and whenever that may be. And so that part of it is just reality. If we're going to have a season, it's better than no baseball at all. There's a value in playing. I understand it, but there's an emptiness that goes with what has been described to us that goes beyond the empty seats. To me, it's an emptiness in here.
Yeah, I'm with you 1,000%. And as you're talking through this, I'm thinking, one of the ways that I've tried to utilize my time in this waiting game is to kind of go back and watch Ken Burns baseball. And, I just did the first and second inning. I'm in the middle of the third inning right now. And I'm thinking, as you're saying this, maybe there will be a charm to baseball. Again, trying to look at this glass half full, it's not what any of us would necessarily pick, but maybe there would be a charm of going back to when you could hear every pop of the mitt and every crack of the bat and the simplicity of the game and the chatter on the field, the way that it was 100 years ago. And then, again, try to fast forward a few more months or into 2021 when hopefully we're a lot closer to whatever normal used to be, that there's a greater appreciation for what we missed or lost out on in 2020. I don't know if there's a right answer to that, but that's a glass half full take, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's real. I just like you guys, I love baseball. I miss it. I would love to watch it. I'd love to follow it. I miss all of that. And in whatever form it returns, I guarantee you I'll watch. I guarantee you millions of people will also watch, and we'll just have to adjust. But there is that expression that you don't know what you're missing until it's taken away from you, until it's gone. And when we do get back to the point where we can all just file into ballparks and press boxes and broadcast booths the way we used to, and hear that roar of the crowd again, it'll never sound louder or sweeter.
Right.
I want to lighten the mood here. Get back to happier topics if we can here, Jayson. We go from the kid growing up in Philadelphia whose sister says, if you want to know anything about baseball, Jason's your guy. You go on to Syracuse. You work in Providence, Rhode Island. You spent all those years in Philadelphia covering the Phillies, and as a columnist, a national writer onto ESPN and ESPN.com, where I think most folks really got to know you nationally. And now in recent years, you've been at The Athletic and at the MLB Network. It all culminates last year with the Spink Award. You're honored by the Baseball Hall of Fame. And for a guy who's so passionate about this game, can you take us back to that weekend in Cooperstown and what it was like to be honored by the people you've covered and the people that you've looked up to and admired and respected and we've all idolized over the years? What's that experience like for the kid from Philly?
I felt like I walked out of that cornfield in Field of Dreams. It's really what it was like. I'm still blown away by how I got treated by the greatest players on earth. From the moment that Wade Boggs walked up to me in the hotel bar on Thursday night, stuck out his hand and said, "Welcome to the club," that's how they all treated me through the entire experience, like I was one of them. I do have a baseball card. There's nothing on the back. It looks a lot different from their baseball cards. But just that part of it alone was mind-blowing. The ceremony in which the writer and broadcaster are now honored is on Saturday. The players were honored on Sunday. So Saturday, the day of my speech, we all assemble in a room at the Osaga Hotel. And so I got there first because I wasn't going to be late for my own Hall of Fame speech. And so just kind of sitting around the room with the staff of the Hall of Fame, and now Ken Griffey filters in, and players start to filter in one by one. And then all of a sudden, after about a half an hour, I looked around and I realized who was in the room. And I thought, what the heck am I doing in this room? And so just for a second, I couldn't breathe. So I got up and I thought, I'm just going to go take a walk down the hall to the men's room and just breathe. So I'm walking, and next thing I know, Jeff Bagwell is walking right beside me, and he says, "How you doing?" And I said, "Jeff, I'm doing okay, but I have to admit, I'm looking around that room thinking, what am I doing in this room?" And he said, "Oh, me too." I said, "Wait, you too? You realize you're a Hall of Famer, right?" And he said, "Yeah, I know, but I don't think of myself as a Hall of Famer the way these guys think of themselves as Hall of Famers." And that really helped relax me, because it is quite a feeling to be surrounded by who you're surrounded with. I got on the bus to go out to Doubleday Field where I was going to give my speech. I didn't know what to do or where to sit. And Jim Tomei was, he had an empty seat next to him, and he patted it, like, "Come sit with me." So I was really grateful. And then we had an incredible talk. I just asked him, he just been through this the year before. I said, "Did you look at your family when you were giving your speech?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely. You've got to do that. That's what it's all about. Sharing that moment with the people you care about most. That's what it's all about." And I'm so glad that he told me that, because I looked into the eyes of my wife, my kids, my family as I was talking about them, and I'll never forget the look in their eyes. And so, like, all of these moments keep flooding back like they happened yesterday. These are memories for a lifetime. And the really cool thing is, not just for me, for so many people that I love and care about. And boy, there are a lot of them.
Well, and there's a lot of people that have shared in your passion for the game throughout the years. And one of the things that I still love now, and it's I'm not smart enough to wrap my head around how you get to these things, but you're these oddball stats in the trivia that always comes up in the rumblings and all kinds of stuff. Where does it all come from, and when did that all start?
I don't know. I need help. I really need to get out more. Like, I have all this ridiculous stuff that rattles around my brain, and I think I need to defragment my hard drive. Just the incredible array of useless trivia that's just there. And I can't really totally explain how I came to be that guy. But I did grow up reading the great sports writers of Philadelphia, which means the great sports writers in America. And there were things that I noticed about the way they wrote. They I didn't realize that you could be that funny in writing about something, right? And they had funny quotes. They found funny people to talk to. I always loved that side of it. When I walk into a locker room, I'm always asking, if I don't know already, who's the funniest guy in the room? Because I need to go there, right? I need to talk to that guy. And just the numbers, I've always loved numbers, and I've always thought that numbers were a cool way to illuminate the game. I think where my love of numbers diverges from a lot of people now is there are people who get so immersed in the numbers they almost think they are the game. I think numbers illuminate the cool aspects of the game. And so, I know we've talked about my mom. My mom always told me I should write a book and call it I Never Saw That Before. And I never did quite write that book, but in a way I'm writing it every day. Right? I write it every thing that I do because I'm just fascinated by that thing that happened last night that hadn't happened in 80 years, and now it's happened twice this week.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
Amazing. You hit on something that I want to go a little deeper with you because, like you, I love the way numbers can help tell a story. It's not about overwhelming people with numbers, but when you can use numbers to help explain something, to tell a story, that's a great thing, and that's something that I also really enjoy doing. But now in this era of analytics, there are different kind of numbers that are important for valuation and certainly important for front offices making the decisions that they make. But when those numbers turn baseball into math class, for the average fan, it almost stops being fun. And I worry about that sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's all in how you use them and how you explain them. Wins above replacement is an incredibly meaningful and useful metric. I couldn't tell you how they figure it out. Okay, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear it. But I think that if you say Mike Trout was a 10-win player, I think that communicates what that is supposed to represent. And so, I don't think you should flood people with terms they don't know and don't understand. I think you should try to put every number in a context that it means something to the people who you're talking to or writing to.
I think it was Vin Scully, and he said a lot of great things, so it was probably Vin Scully. But he said about young broadcasters that statistics are like a lamppost to a drunk. Use them to illuminate, but not to lean on. So that's kind of exactly what you're saying right now. But if you just sit there and you rattle off the phone book during a broadcast, there's no connection, and that's what your career has been about, and what we try to make our games about is that connection. You're watching it on TV, you're listening to it on the radio, you're not in that ballpark. We have to create that connection, that physical connection that you don't have. So that's one of those things that me as a young broadcaster is always try to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I've been writing these pieces since I got to The Athletic before and after every season, the numbers that define baseball. And that's exactly what those columns are supposed to be. If you roll the number 8,000 out there, and, in and of itself, that number doesn't mean anything. But if you then say there were 8,000 more strikeouts in baseball than there were 10 years ago, then that becomes a big number that illustrates the way the sport has changed. And so that, to me, is the way to use numbers. Not that I won't occasionally write about a number for its own sake if it's really weird.
Right.
But in general, I try to, when I'm writing about anything, find a number or a set of numbers that really puts that thing in a context that makes you realize just how unusual it is.
We've got a limited amount of time with Jayson. And Jayson, I want to ask you one Marlins-related question, a subject that's very near and dear to the hearts of Marlins fans. Jose Fernandez. A couple of days ago was the 7th anniversary of his Major League debut. I mentioned that on social media and was overwhelmed by the response, people talking about their favorite Jose memories and things like that. We're coming up now on the anniversary of his passing in September. It'll be hard to believe 4 years already. You wrote a piece just about a year ago about Jose, and I've talked about him a lot as maybe the greatest what if in baseball history. A guy who would accomplish so much so quickly, but was taken away from us. What did you learn in doing this remarkable piece, talking to people who knew Jose, who played against, managed him, coached him, his agent? What did you learn about Jose Fernandez putting that piece together last year?
Yeah, that piece was the Jose Fernandez free agent winner that never was. And, I mean, that was a what-if piece. But it led to a lot of other what-ifs. Just in terms of how it connects to the Marlins then and now. What if Jose had lived? What would have happened to the Marlins? Because there was a window to win with Jose Fernandez and this great cast that you now have seen dispersed around the game, Giancarlo and Yelich and Ozuna and JT, and it was all coming together. And that event that unraveled it all was the passing of this great kid. And I wasn't around Jose that much, but what a force of nature. To be around him was unlike anything that you could compare to anyone else. He had this charisma and this energy about him that caused everybody to gravitate to him, that caused everybody to smile. And that was before he ever got to the mound, and how much fun he would have on the mound. And I just don't know what the limits were. I mean, this could have been a Hall of Fame pitcher, but more than that, one of the most beloved pitchers of modern times. It's just such a loss. And the what ifs, I feel like they still reverberate through time for me.
Yeah. They absolutely do. Again, as Glenn mentioned, tight on time. What we've been doing the last couple of shows, Jayson, has been what we like to call a hit and run. So Geff's got some questions, some quick hitters, and then you run. So let's roll through some of those.
All right, hit and run with Jayson Stark. Jayson, you've talked to a lot of players over the years. Who tops your list? Most quotable, the best quote. And is there one particular quote you've unearthed over the years that really comes to mind first and foremost for you?
I mean, it's really hard to ask me who was the best quote of any player I've ever talked to, because, as I said, I'm always looking for the funniest guys in the room. If I had to pick one, I guess I'd pick my co-host on my podcast, Starkville, Doug Glanville. It's because I love guys who just have this range. They can be serious, they can be funny, they can be everything in between. Doug's the only player I've ever been around who used the phrase time, space, continuum. Right? It was the Phillies had went through a week where they had 11 hours of rain delays or something, and I think that was the context of time, space, continuum. But I could spend the rest of this visit just spinning out the names of my favorite quotable players.
Yeah, it took an Ivy League to come up with that one at the University of Pennsylvania. Hey, of all the numbers you've researched, the great stats you run out there in all of your columns year after year after year, is there one that, for whatever reason, the wow factor, the work that went into it really stands out for you?
Okay, I'll tell you one that I'm actually in the process of writing about again. It's the strangest home run of the 21st century. Bengie Molina, 2008, hit a home run, but did not score a run on his own homer. How did that happen, you ask? Let me tell you how this happened. Bengie Molina, playing for the Giants, hits a ball at AT&T Park, and hits off the top of the wall. And because he's Bengie Molina, he stops at first base. Right? So now Bruce Bochy's the manager, sends in Emmanuel Barris to pinch run for Bengie, and now Bochy does the pinch running thing, and all of a sudden, here comes Omar Vizquel. And Omar says to him, "Hey, Boch, I think that ball actually went over the wall and then bounced back. If I were you, I'd appeal this. I'd go to the umpires and ask them to look at the replay." So the umpires check the replay. Sure enough, Omar Vizquel gets it right. The ball went out. And so now here comes Bengie Molina trotting back out of the dugout to finish his home run trot. And the umpires are saying, "Not so fast. We're already out of the game." So Emmanuel Barris completes Bengie Molina's home run trot. And I think of this as the home run that broke Baseball Reference, because if you go to the box score, there's like a 200-word section explaining why it says in their box score there's a run next to Benji Molina that he didn't actually score. The computers don't believe this happened.
Did Molina get the home run in the RBI and Burris got the run scored? How does that work?
That's correct. That was the ruling of Major League Baseball, and it literally broke all the computers.
Yeah.
You cannot enter that into a computer.
All right, Jayson, if you could have done your job in any other era in baseball history, what era would you have liked to have worked in?
You know, I'm actually a big fan of this era. I mean, I like having the internet. I like having Baseball Reference and stats and Baseball Info Solutions. Like, I do go back to a time where Tim Kirkshire and I used to take what we call these trips through the encyclopedia, where we had to look up something, but the only way to do it was to start on the first page of the encyclopedia and go all the way through. It would take days. I don't miss any of that.
And you had to carry that baseball encyclopedia around everywhere you went.
I think there's one up there in this bookcase here. So I haven't actually traveled through it in quite a while. But I like this one. If you really made me pick one, I'd pick probably the 1920s. Larger-than-life characters. Day games were good. I don't know.
Riding on the train.
That's the fourth inning on baseball. I'm looking forward to fourth inning in Ken Burns baseball. It's good. Good.
Yeah.
Right. In that same vein, is there a player who came along before your time you wish you could have covered and been around on a daily basis?
Absolutely, Babe Ruth. I mean, I've read a lot of these Babe Ruth books, and I just envision a guy who was that much larger than life and larger than his sport. Always something going on. Amazing stuff to see. When you talk about the Ken Burns series, are you up to the 20s yet, Paul?
I watched it years ago, and I'm rewatching it now with kind of a clearer head. So I think I just started the third, so I think that's the 10s, the 1910s.
Okay,
yeah.
So like in the 20s, you get to see Babe Ruth hit his 60th homer. That's a thrill. I wouldn't mind jumping in the time machine and watching that.
Right.
Did he really call his own homer? I need to know these things.
Lastly, for Jayson Stark, as we finish up Hit and Run here, what advice would you give a young aspiring journalist who wants to be the next Jayson Stark?
Careful what you wish for, but I would say, don't be afraid to dream. Don't be afraid to do something you love and whatever it takes to do it. That's really kind of my story. I tell people all the time that my job is a labor of love. It's a good thing because there's a lot of labor, but it never feels like work to me. And so, I used to tell people, a path they could go on that would get them a job covering baseball at a newspaper or a website. And like the state of modern media, it's a little harder to do that. But I've seen people now who think outside the box and find ways to write about baseball, talk about baseball, be around baseball that we never imagined. And I think that's kind of the ticket. Invent your own MLB trade rumors, right? Or just some site that catches fire, that becomes integral to the lives of people like us. It just takes dreaming, loving it, and thinking outside the box. So let's all try that.
Yeah.
Well, nobody has loved it more than Jayson Stark. Jayson, this has been a lot of fun. We really appreciate it.
Well, I love being on with you guys. Hopefully we'll see each other at a ballpark or a press box sometime, huh?
I hope so. Jayson Stark, we appreciate it. The Hall of Famer, honoree, sure, but the Hall of Famer, Jayson Stark. Thanks so much, pal. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jayson.
Again, the passion that he has, Geff, for the game of baseball, it's really infectious, and you can get right to the bottom of that immediately in the first 10 seconds of talking to him.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, actually, had we had more time, would like to have asked him about. When you do something as long as he's done it, how do you maintain that freshness and that passion? Because it is a grind when you do something day after day, baseball season, with rarely a day off, playing the marathon of 162 year after year, telling those stories, the search for the stories, the search for the nuggets and the information in Jayson's case specifically, trying to stay ahead of everybody else, come up with something that nobody else has done. How do you do that as long as he has done it? I think the answer is without the passion he has and has always had, you just can't. And that's why he's so much fun to always be around and fun to talk to.
Yeah, great. Always fun to talk with him. So, we thank Jayson Stark. I know the connection was iffy. We lost him at one point. It was kind of iffy as we were going through, so we apologize. But I know that still the tons and tons of information and passion and emotion came through that. So again, our thanks to Jayson Stark. One thing that we've been doing, Geff, the last couple of shows here is the mailbag as well. And you are the king of the question. I got to come up with something better than that. But you are the question man. You always come up with our questions of the day, but now there's other people asking us the questions. So let's get to our mailbag now, shall we? Let's see what we have in our mailbag.
We invite people to send us questions. If you have a question for Paul and me specifically to get into on one of these upcoming shows. Today, Tyler from Texas came at us on Twitter with a question. He asked if we still get nervous before broadcast, and how do we handle the nerves that come with the job. Paul, why don't you go first? Unless you're too nervous.
No. I do you get different forms of nervous, I think, over the course of, opening day always has your jitters, maybe, big series, big moments in a game. Sometimes you might have a little bit of nerves, but I think really in terms of, for me, once I've settled into the routine, again, it sounds a lot like the players. Once you settle into your routine, you trust your routine. And okay, I get to the ballpark at this time and I work on this. And then I go downstairs and talk to Donnie for this long. And then I have batting practice, come up, more work, dinner, game. Okay, now you're kind of in the mode, and it's just, your day doesn't start at 7 o'clock when we go on the air. Your day kind of starts at 3. So by 7, it's more of a running start. So you don't always think of that. But in terms of, for me, where there's a big moment in a game or whatever, I think what Dave Van Horn mentioned in the last show for me is what I try to do is just keep it simple and then get out of the way. And I think sometimes if you are nervous, you might want to think about doing things too much, too fast, too soon, and then that's when you're going to get yourself in trouble, and those nerves will then come through on the microphone.
Yeah, what I would say is, for me, it's not nervousness, but there is a rush of adrenaline. There is an anticipation as you get set to go on the air every night. And the thing is, no matter what happened yesterday, no matter what might happen tomorrow, today's a new day, and you don't know what you're about to see for the next 3 hours or so. And what we do on a nightly basis really is a performance. And you're going out there and you get locked in for those 3 hours and you're on the air. You're on the edge of your seats at certain points in the game. You are excited about things that might happen on the field. You're anticipating what might happen next. So it's not nervousness at all, but there is that rush of adrenaline that if you didn't feel it in the pit of your stomach before you went on the air, you're probably maybe not doing the right job, because no matter how long you've done this, you still ought to get that rush of adrenaline when you go on the air and start the broadcast every night.
Yeah, players say that all the time. If I didn't get nervous before a game, that's when I know I should be done. Again, I lean on Geff for these sorts of things all the time. His question of the day as well. Time for our question of the day. Geff, what do you have?
This is a question of the day I actually rolled out yesterday, and there was so much response to it, I decided we'd get into it on the show here today. Yesterday happened to be the anniversary of a day off we had last year in Cincinnati. I spent part of that day visiting the Reds Hall of Fame Museum at Great American Ballpark, and it got me thinking, if the Marlins were to start their own Hall of Fame, the Marlins haven't even been around for 30 years yet, and the other 90s expansion teams don't have Halls of Fame yet, but if the Marlins started a Hall of Fame, I asked, who would you recommend as the first 3 inductees? And we got a ton of response to this question. In fact, Fish Stripes, our friends over at Fish Stripes, have started their own campaign. I think as of today, they're asking for solicitations for the Marlins Hall of Fame, if the Marlins were to start a Hall of Fame. But here's what I found, and this really blew me away. I asked for 3. I got 27 different names mentioned in the young history of this franchise. And you can make some kind of an argument for just about every one of those 27 names. The one guy who was the runaway leading vote getter was the guy they called Mr. Marlin, Jeff Conine. Not much of a surprise there at all. Jose Fernandez, in a short period of time, was a very strong number 2 in the list of most votes received. There was just about a deadlock for the 3rd spot between Luis Castillo and Jack McKeon. Very interesting. And then the next group that was right up there in striking distance involved Miguel Cabrera, Mike Lowell, Josh Beckett, Charles Johnson, Gary Sheffield, and Giancarlo Stanton. Those were the names that were on the most ballots. But you can make an argument for the Edgar Renterias, and there were a whole list of names people came up with who certainly were part of many great moments in this franchise's history. And when you're thinking about a Hall of Fame, for a team that's not been around that long, a lot to consider.
Right, for a team that's not been around that long, and is really, in all honesty, we all know this, has had 2 winning seasons, finished with the championship winning seasons. And yeah, but that doesn't mean that they have been shortchanged for great talent that has come through. There's been a lot of it. And again, I think a lot of that comes through in the love of this organization and the history of this organization. What just last night, the MLB Network had played a game from the 03 playoffs. The other day, I got swept up on YouTube on Game 4 of that division series against the Giants with Pudge Rodriguez holding the ball at the end. There have been great moments and there have been great players in this franchise's history. And if I may, for a moment here, that's what we're all hoping for comes more often, right?
There'll be more in the future,
right? And not just in '97 and 2003 and 15 years later, but a sustained amount of this kind of stuff where there are those great moments. And again, hopefully to come full circle on what Jayson was talking about. Once we all get back to the ballpark and get back to normal, and there's loud screaming fans in the seats. There will be more moments to come, Geff, I'm sure of it.
Let's look forward to those. And when they come, we think the man in the dugout is going to be Don Mattingly, who, by the way, we can announce is going to be our guest on our next edition of Sev Geff Live. We'll have details coming up in the next few days as to exactly when. But count on Don Mattingly to join us next time that we hit the air. So we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're excited for that. A lot of questions to ask Donnie. It's going to be, just so we all know, it's going to be some Marlins stuff and some history of Don Mattingly stuff. A lot of times we talk to him before a game in June or July. We're talking about that night or the night before. But this will be fun to kind of get into Donnie's history and his background and how he came from Evansville, Indiana, all the way to manager of the Marlins. So we're looking forward to that. As Geff
I'm going to ask him about the Hitman poster.
Yeah.
I never asked him about the Hitman poster. One of my favorites as a kid.
I had the other one. I had the New York's Finest poster with the hat up just a little bit. He's fixing the batting gloves. I think that's actually still up on the door in my bedroom. But all right, so that's great. So again, details to follow. If you follow at Sev Geff Live on Twitter, Sev Geff Live branding all over the place. That's our Twitter handle, our YouTube channel, Facebook channel, mug.
We've got the mug now.
There's no merch just yet. That's a
surprising demand for merch.
Sev Geff special right there. T-shirts, hats.
You and I no longer have to social distance. You'll have some mugs of your own, by the way, Paul.
License plates, everything. Diapers, it's going to be great.
Mouse pads.
Mouse pads, yeah, that too. Yeah. All right, so again, our thanks to Jayson Stark. We look forward to Don Mattingly coming up early next week. Geff, as always, it's been a pleasure, pal.
It's been a lot of fun. Jayson was great. Can't wait to do it again soon.
All right, ladies and gents, we'll see you. Again, check out the YouTube channel for our SGL shorts, the hit and run segments. Lots and lots of content being churned out there, even when we're not doing these types of shows. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks again to Jayson Stark. We'll see you next time.